on TV.
Put your hair down.
So here we are. Welcome back. We're very, very happy to have Juan Carlos Arauz, Dr. Juan Carlos Arauz, hosting the segment corresponding to the time zone in San Francisco. Juan Carlos is a man of multiple talents and of great idealism that he enacts, which is very few people that I know act on their ideals as Juan Carlos does. So he'll probably share a little bit more about himself and the work that he does. But let me say that I'm truly honored, very grateful, Juan Carlos, that you're here with us today. You might want to know that we dedicated a whole segment to Human Edu, and we even shared some of your pictures there earlier today. The Argentina segment was Human Edu, so as befits. So thank you, Juan Carlos, and we're all yours. I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll chat.
Okay. Well, I'll begin by saying good morning in English, bom dia in Portuguese. I was born in Brazil. Buenos dias for those that speak Spanish, and Kuali Telenasi for my indigenous ancestors. Wanted to thank Gabriel for this opportunity to share with all of you. I'm really honored to continue to be in a space where we get to connect human beings who are, really passionate about education and about helping one another and learn from one another. So I look forward to share with you about some work that we do here, and particularly this concept that we're working on called the Ecosystem Collective. So before I go into that space, I think it makes sense for me to start with me, our organization, and then the Ecosystem Collective. So that's how I will take us, and I'll start by sharing my screen. So let me do that piece here. Let's see. Slideshow. All right. So hopefully folks can see the screen here that basically you'll see 4 images. And what I want to share with all of us is just, the power of education is not just the ability of obtaining knowledge, learning how to read and write, or whatever that may look like for us, but rather it is about discovering who we are based on where we come from, and in order to identify where we can go. And so I begin with just honoring, you'll see to the right of the screen, you'll see what hopefully describes, and you can see an eagle, águila, at the top, but that actually hopefully looks like a little bit like North America. And you see then in the middle, Quetzal, the bird there, that would be Central America. And you see in the south, what would be South America condor. As I mentioned, I was born in Brazil with my parents who were born in Nicaragua, and they moved to Brazil, and then we later moved to the United States. And so this connection is something that I think is very strong within me, but I do believe it does exist within all of us that live on this hemisphere. The stories, that is. We may not have all of the experiences, but the stories we know. You see a picture of me there in the top center. That is me in first grade as I was learning English, coming to a school here in the United States. When I moved here from Brazil, from then Nicaragua, and then here in the United States. You see a smile, which is really, really wonderful, as we always like to think that, young people, particularly children at that age, develop and demonstrate the highest form of genius at that age. We know this. So many studies have demonstrated the level of creativity, and that's what I mean by genius, the level of creativity and brilliance that students share. The challenge, of course, that we live in is that we live in an institution of education that often diminishes that smile or diminishes what is creativity over time. So then I fast forward to show below, you'll see a picture of myself and our 8 children that I was wonderfully blessed to be part of, because the two biological children that I had, there were also adopted children that were in the United States in a foster care system, and because of their political situation in which they were deemed as undocumented, their parents were deported, but the children were left then here to figure out how to fend for themselves. So we had several families that decided to go ahead and bring the children, at least, to have a home. There was a total of 29 children that we brought in, but only 6 were able to stay with us during that time. So I share that because, again, I think it's important when we think about the work and we think about education, we think about it in a holistic manner. There are so many things that are happening, and how do we take that into account when you're in a classroom setting? And that's just giving us a picture there. And then to my left, or to the left of the screen, you'll see a family tree. And you'll see 6 generations there of my family. And what I want to share about this, that in order to kind of bring us into this concept of education, is there's a lot of pride that I have of my father to go through and find and identify our long lineage of where we come from. What I learned around this is, again, when I present this picture and this image for everybody, and we think of education, we often think that education is simply the knowledge space of knowing something, of what is written down or what degrees we have. What I want to invite us to consider, and what I'm going to propose today, is that actually there's so much more than this as education. So what I mean to say is, as it relates to my family, I have a written description of where my family comes. But I also have to the right a screen that shows actually the stories that are untold of the Águila, Quetzal, and Condor. And then in that, you have a small child, which is me at the front, but all of us, that when we were a small child, were told maybe one of these stories, but not all of these stories. And then it becomes complex, which is what you see at the bottom, the complexity of my life and the untold stories. And so that's what I hope is to for us to explore. That is, I think about my own journey. We don't talk about, while I know that my name comes from Araujo, northern Basque Country in Spain, and that's where we know the last name comes from. There are the untold stories of, on the right-hand side of the Águila, Quetzal, Condor, about my indigenous background, of my African background. And those are not untold stories because they were not necessarily shameful stories, but because we live in a patriarchal society, we're only told the stories of the victors, we're only told the stories of the men, only what's written down, and yet there's a whole story of my unspoken side. So all of that is an intro that I just want to share of again, why I started this work in this way. So the organization that I represent here is E3, Education, Excellence, and Equity. And the concept that I want to distinct is there's a difference between identifying one's brilliance and one being smart. Smart is a measurement defined by somebody's rubric of what is smart, often based on knowledge. Brilliance, instead, is actually, brilliance is what every individual has that makes them unique, shine bright, and makes them who they are. Whether we use this in a religious, spiritual sense or in simply an academic sense, all of us as educators are really designed to bring out the Latin root word of educate, which is to educare, is to bring out the brilliance in people. So our role as educators is to figure out, how do we bring out that brilliance in young people? And the other example that I'll give for this concept is, when we think of what is the brightest star in the universe, most people say the sun. However, we don't know that for sure, but because it's to close proximity to us, we think it's the brightest star. So when we think of brilliance, think of it in terms of what is bright by your proximity. This is why parents think their children are bright, because of the proximity. They see the uniqueness. Sometimes it's maybe too much for parents, that they think that too much of their students, their children. But the reality is, all of our children are bright and brilliant. It's our job to figure out how to bring that brilliance out. And so you see on one of our retreats, we had on the beach written out that our goal is to reach to 3 billion students who are institutionalized to not see how brilliant they are. Since 2008, when we began, we were able to reach now over 500,000 students, and over 100 tools that we have for folks, and we've had our work translated into 5 languages. It's something that we're really proud of, that we get to go out and show the work that we do. We've had the opportunity to work with all kinds of educational institutions, corporations, and Catholic institutions, and even nonprofits. So the work is out there, which makes us believe in what we're sharing. To give us a sense of the concept of what we have, we will use this as a resource. Gabrielle, I'll make sure I'll share this with you, so that if people want to have access to all of our tools that help bring out the brilliance of students, you'll see that on the bottom of the screen. All those are hyperlinks. You'll see also there are 4 books in which I have authored chapters in, to be able to highlight how do you do the brilliance in our students. So there's opportunities there for us to connect if any of this is of interest to you. So we start with this work as an organization. Can you imagine living with the label "most likely to fail"? Why would then people want to engage in trying to do their best if you have that tape recorder? And so oftentimes children walk into a classroom where they think, I'm going to fail, so why bother trying? So that's something that limits our brilliance. I can speak from personal experience as someone who went through the school system, not learning how to read or write by the age of 19. You just give up on your classes, where you just assume that it's not going to be any benefit, so why bother trying? On the other end of the spectrum, we have amazing institutions that are called gifted schools. But imagine with having the burden of you can never fail, then why would you take any risks? And the whole point of really the creativity of the mind and the brilliance of one requires risks. So if you are on all ends of the spectrums and in between, these institutions need to find a way to in a healthy way, help students take risks in that way. So one of the pieces I offer to let people know why this is a little bit challenging is understanding what happens to the amygdala. So our amygdala, maybe many of us are familiar with, is that oftentimes before we even think how we'll respond to something, we actually are in fight, flight, freeze, or appease mode. And before you even respond, your amygdala has already responded for you. And so the challenge around this is taking risks are really hard. If it's something different, it's really hard. Oftentimes what will occur is there has to be something more exciting for you to be willing to take that risk. That's the piece that I invite people to consider, is like, what is it that you're passionate about? What is it that you feel most excited about? This will help you overcome your amygdala. One of the things that I like to always share in this work is the concept of epistemology. And so Dr. Gloria Anzaldúa likes to talk about this, that of a cultural choque, a cultural collision. And so the invitation that I have is for us to think about, what am I passionate about? And then when I do something, why is it that there is a collision? What is it that is actually happening in that moment? The epistemological work of this is what makes things so challenging. And this is the invitation for us to be able to think about, how do we get beyond our amygdala response? And then when we have a choque, how do we actually move beyond those? So those are the pieces that are real obstacles for us. So then it requires this next phrase, authentic listening. And this is a phrase that I invited, Dr. Johnny Wabike, who I've worked with, who has a Learning Listening Institute, to better help us authentically listen. Again, we want to make sure we are not reacting without intentionality. But the way to get there is by actually authentically listening. One of the things that I learned is that in Eastern culture, we think of listening in a different way. Specifically, as you'll see in the kanji characters, the concept of listening is with the ears, eyes, heart, attention, and mind. It's a full process. This is my invitation of how we might think about how to work to get beyond those obstacles that exist of the cultural clash and the amygdala that exists. This is what's going to enable us to become brilliant, to see that. And lastly, this last phrase here, conscienciação, from Paulo Freire, the critical consciousness, is starting to understand intrapersonally, what do I believe in? Interpersonally, how is my behavior aligned with what I believe in? And then the frame is the institution that you're in. So do all three align? That's the ideal space to ensure our students are able to find that kind of brilliance in that way. So that's the kind of work that we do with our tools, is to help individually people reframe their belief system, interpersonally work with others so that their behaviors align with their values, and then ultimately have policies and structures in place for the institution to enable students to shine in their brilliance. So that was a big overview. I'm going to give some concrete examples and then share about the ecosystem collective here in a moment. So one of the, I'm going to move over to our pieces. One of the concrete ways that we have been able to do this is utilize this phrase called cultural resilience. There are 5 competencies, which are around here, known as innovation, adaptability, cross-cultural communication, critical analysis, and teamwork. The concept to identify one's brilliance is to be able to highlight what are my life experiences that I have gone through, whether they're happy or sad, mad or glad, and what have I learned from those? What skills have developed that for me? So I'll give some examples here for us. So innovation could easily be something of a positive experience where you're allowed to, go to a park and as a child, play on the different swing sets or whatever is there, and create your own games or create your own activities that you have. That's a form of innovation. But also innovation can come out of a space of poverty where you don't have, especially our children, don't have maybe an iPhone or don't have maybe the materialistic items that games that children would want to play. So they create their own games. They learn how to be innovative in their own ways as they go through. What about the clothes that they wear that they may, create on their own? Those are things that, again, whether they're positive or negative are not important, but we often get stuck on the story instead of actually focusing on the skill. What we try to do is help children and then institutions focus on the skills that they get. Maybe you moved around because you were in the military, or maybe because you're an immigrant or migrant person. That increases your adaptability. We often think of bilingual as something that is negative. In the United States, unfortunately, like over in schools, you'll see where, many schools where the majority of students are monolingual. Well, what we like to introduce is the concept of cross-cultural communication. It's not just language, but understanding code switching and behavior. And the critical analysis is where we're able to create and think about 2 distinct ways of being with a problem that comes our way. Problems are helpful. And then teamwork can be because you're playing team sports, or maybe you have a large family. We've created a survey that enables students to be able to take this. They are able to see their brilliance. And we have found students, even as young as third grade, when they take this, how excited they are about themselves and school when they take and have this transformative moment and see like, oh, I really am smart because I know about my life and I know the skills that I've gained. So this is what I would invite us to consider is always to share this, at least the survey, with as many students as possible. And then there's a free curriculum for folks to imply afterwards if they'd like. The goal for a teacher is to be able to identify how does this show up for them in a classroom setting where they're actually not just monitoring what they know, but rather measuring these 5 competencies. Number of instances they observe these competencies. How is the skill demonstrated? Having both the teacher and student engage in this process from week to week enables the student to build their confidence so that when the content of whatever they're studying, science, math, English, history, this becomes the empowerment that students feel confident to be able to navigate those spaces because they do have the skills to be able to master that content. So this is a opportunity for not just a transformative moment by taking the survey, but actually for a teacher and student to be able to be engaged in this on a regular weekly basis. So that's the work in what we try to do in that way. And so now what I'd like to share is maybe something a little bit broader because as I mentioned before, we've been so lucky and fortunate that we were in a space. So I'm going to pause here for a second so I can move the screen. And so what I wanted to say is that how do we move to a place that is people are actually helping us move forward? How are we doing that? And what I learned was even in our organization, having the impact that it had around the world, we realized we were just only one organization. And we were only a small piece of the puzzle. So one of the things that I have attempted to do at this point is generate what we call an ecosystem collective. And the concept being very simple. Here in the United States, for example, one of the most challenging things of this country is where our health nutrition system is not very good. There are things that in the United States you can buy, but you cannot buy in Europe or even outside of the United States because the processed food is that damaging. Yet, in the United States, we have so many organic farms that exist that now there are stores that are purely organic stores. That is because there's an ecosystem that has been developed about organic farming. It started with one farm and then another farm, and then it just continued to build. It continued to build and build, and as a result, we were able to create that opportunity. So my offering that I have for us is how do we do the same for us here? So that I'll go ahead and share with us. So this ecosystem collective is one, and when we think about organic, there's certain practices such as we don't use pesticides. For us, the ecosystem collective here rewards a practice of reciprocal trust, gratitude, and generosity. So this is for any nonprofit that exists that says, I want to do great work in the world, and there are so many organizations that do that. It doesn't have to be in education. It can be in health and wellness. It can be in arts and culture. It can be on economic sustainability. The idea being that we want to say, we're going to create these organizations that focus on these 3 values. And by focusing on these 3 values, these organizations are not just solving problems, which is important, but rather they're sharing brilliance, hope, and joy. And that's, I think, the idea that we want to be able to create around the world. So we have been very fortunate that with this ecosystem, I want to explain how that actually happens. So we have, in order to reward reciprocal trust, we have to practice a distributive model of leadership, meaning we currently work in a patriarchal model where only one person is in charge. In a distributive leadership model, we actually determine what decisions are made best collectively or within a small group. And that's how we're able to measure this reciprocal trust. Through gratitude, this is a big value. We want to practice that through the practice of restorative justice. What that means is oftentimes people think that when somebody has done something wrong, that we will do then a punitive approach. In actuality, we want to create a restorative approach. And so even if it's a small event, something as simple as, let's just say between Gabrielle and I, he misnames me as somebody else and I get offended. Well, instead of pretending that that goes away, I am in gratitude that I have a relationship with Gabriel. So then I practice my restorative process that I just share with him using nonviolent communication and saying, Gabriel, when you called me by the other name, it made me feel like you were stereotyping me. What I really want to understand is, do you have a hard time pronouncing my name or do you remember my name? That moment feels very awkward, and yet it is so powerful in restoring a relationship that creates that trust and that gratitude for us being together. And then the third one is this generosity. How do you practice generosity? Well, in most companies, with nonprofits especially, they follow a capitalistic model in which the current capitalistic model focuses on greed, meaning how much can we make with at little least expenses and costs as possible. And oftentimes we don't think about the impact that that has on people and on the planet. Now we have a place called conscious capitalism, where we focus on people, planet, and profit. Those are three wonderful ways. However, a nonprofit is designed not to make profit. That's why they call it a nonprofit. So what we created was, through generosity, practice the gift economy, where we will align and do work with another community or provide the service because we want to engage with them. They in turn will actually provide us a gift, like a donation. This is a very, very challenging space because people who work in the nonprofit space will say, how are we going to confirm what our budget is and just trust that people are going to give us enough money? And so what we created then is an endowment, a collective endowment, so that with an endowment, what would mean is that we raise enough money and that the money we use is only from the interest of that money. So an example being, if you raise $5 million, you would only use the interest of that, which would be $250,000 a year. That, for many organizations around the world and here in the United States, are sufficient that they can just work the way they are and they could accept gifts from there on out. So that's how we practice generosity in that way. And one of the things that we've learned is, in nonprofit worlds, over 80% of nonprofits have employees that are less than 5. And in corporations, companies around the world, over 85% have less than 10 employees. So most people already work in a small company or a small nonprofit. So the practice of gift economy is something that would be very helpful for nonprofits in building their endowment. Our hope in the short term is that we're able to connect more and have shared resources. Long term is to be an incubator for change, is create this ecosystem where then other entities are created. And eventually, just as I shared earlier about the organic farming, you end up having organic stores. And then you end up having a movement where people are thinking, how do we live in a way that reduces harm to the planet and people? In our nonprofit model, we want to do the same thing by showing the reciprocal trust, gratitude, and generosity to what we want to reward. Currently, our world rewards greed, it rewards violence, and it rewards control. So we can only address that system by having nonprofits collectively come together to reward something different. So, big question always comes in. How can we get involved? How can we be engaged in this way? And so if you're part of a nonprofit, maybe this is something that you want to look at how that aligns with you. Maybe you're an individual, but you want to play a role in the ecosystem. Or maybe you're part of just a community that already aligns with these core values. So we highly anticipate for each of you all to get engaged in some way. But I want to just finally share, before we go into some Q&As here with Gabriela and myself, I want to just share at least who is involved currently. And so let me go to those slides here. There are over 15 of us who are engaged in our spaces. They come from all over the world. I have a picture of them here. We had our big event in September, and we had them come from India, Singapore, South America, Central America, and all the United States. And so this is something that, again, I will share with all of us. But we have, for example, the images. Again, one of the things that is always helpful is visual imagery. But here are our organizations that we have been able to connect in these spaces, who have been engaged with us. And here are some of the names of the people who have committed to joining this collective to raise the endowments for us. But we have people who are around the globe here involved with us that came together in September. We have those who are within the United States, around the world, from Big Shots to Sacred Seasons. And then we have locally in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I'm located, our local organizations in that space. All of us came together. We have a commitment to come together 4 times a year, one time at least in person. We hope to continue to bring in more folks to engage with us in this way. And the idea being is all of these organizations are doing phenomenal work in their own communities. Thais Pinheiro is doing amazing work in Brazil, talking about Quilombo communities. Gabriel is doing the great work with LearnerSpace and the Human EDU that we mentioned earlier. Ashanti Branch from Ever Forward is doing amazing work around helping young men get behind the mask that they live in. Fabio Chavez is doing the Recycled Orchestra de Cateura from Paraguay. They take recycled material from a landfill and create instruments, and they're now an orchestra. Those are just, again, I've just mentioned 5. All of these organizations are relatively small, but doing great things. So the goal is for us to come together in that space. So with that, let me take a pause here. Gabrielle, if you want to engage in a dialogue or Q&As, I can share more as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Juan Carlos. That was, as usual, wonderful and very inspiring. How do you translate this into education in the K-12 sector? Like all of the wonderful work that you've shared, all of these organizations and people behind them who are aligned with a very strong sense of purpose that seeks to contribute to society. But you're also an educator in the K-12 space.
Mm.
How do you foster this kind of initiative, inspiration in school children or in teenagers at the high school level?
Mm. So that's a great question, and I currently work with a high school right now, the Branson School, where our work is to focus on growing good humans. And in order to achieve the growing good humans, of course, we have to make sure we take care of the academic spaces. What is also important is, I think, creating that academic challenge that students must go through, all the homework that they have to have and do all that work, but use that as a way for then the students to talk about what their values are, what their purpose is, to critically reflect on who they want to become, and creating space for that. So institutionally, example, the Branch School has created a space where every day for half an hour, every day, they're in groups, whether it's clubs or affinity space or an advisory space, but they're in a club, they're in a group space that takes time to intentionally ask those questions. Institutionally, it takes time to create retreats for the students to be able to go and reflect. have connection with nature to be able to reflect how they are actually more connected than not connected. Too often, teenagers and adolescents, especially from the ages, when we think of adolescent development, from 0 to 5 is so important of their relationship with their families. So in that space, the challenge around that often is where they're going to be able to focus on their parents. When they go to the ages of 10 to 18, they are now thinking more about how they are connected and disconnected from society. And so for us, the idea behind all of this is being able to help them realize their connection to others, not connection to just themselves. So in there, what I want to be able to help people start to understand is, what are the tools that we can provide? What are the experiences that we can provide that help adolescents feel connection and find their brilliance? So there's what our tools do of E3, but I can speak about Ashanti Branch, who comes in, and how do we help him get into other schools to share that? Or I think of Big Shots with Corey Wallace, who, for the people who like the sport of basketball, how do they get them into their school? So part of this is just, I think, organizationally, getting these organizations into more schools for a short period of time. So that's one of the pieces that this ecosystem collective tries to do.
One of the common themes in all that we've done so far today has been how we ourselves have been awakened to our deeper sense of purpose. And we've shared many transformational journeys, from school heads who are running innovative schools to Danny and Leandro, whom you know, and Juan Mora from Human Edu, to Peter Foster in Australia, who's reconverted from being a head of a high-performing academic school to a new, completely different paradigm in the industry school, where his kids are learning equestrian skills, etc. Can you share with us a little bit of your own journey? How did you resonate? How did you connect with your sense of purpose? What happened in your life that made you be who you are?
Great question. As you were just sharing the stories of some of the people who I've met, again, I'm just so amazed about the world that we live in. To say this, we all come from different spaces. I'm going to share mine. We all come from different spaces, whether we have a lot of privilege or we don't have a lot of privilege, whatever that means for us. And one of the things that I've come to learn about finding one's purpose is, whether it's a crisis that creates the sense of purpose of understanding where you come from, or it's the opportunity of privilege that creates the space for you to understand your purpose. Both are valid. And so I want to offer a story of both. So I came to understand my purpose first by having a very challenging life. And what I mean by challenging is, maybe it wasn't something that was supposed to happen when I start saying these examples. But because of those life experiences that were challenging for me, in my early 20s, I knew that I was committed to education so that nobody was going to have those same experiences. So some concrete examples. So moving a lot was very challenging, especially because our family didn't have a lot of money. And so poverty was a very real challenge. And getting bullied at school for not having the right clothes or not having enough to eat or whatever, that has an impact on your self-esteem. Also, the challenges were at home, having challenges at home, where my father would beat me. Many families I know that happens normally, but it also impacts your self-confidence. And so I didn't have a lot of self-confidence growing up. In my teens, having a lot of challenges with law enforcement, and where the stereotype of low expectations. I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself, because not only did my family have strong concerns about me, but then also school and then society, I'm thinking, wow, why would I want to continue doing anything? And that helped me create a space of education. 1 second. So on the flip side, I want to offer the concept of the opportunity of privilege to have time. I also was able to continue school. It took me 10 years, I mentioned because I couldn't read and write, 10 years to graduate through college. It then took me another 8 years to complete my doctorate work. But that was a privilege that I had so much time to critically reflect on what my purpose was. So at first, my purpose was to fight against the very establishment and system and things that made my life so challenging. And that was a strong purpose. By having the privilege to critically reflect and do all of those things, being in school requires a lot of thinking, a lot of alone time. That privilege enabled me to realize I didn't want to fight against something. I wanted to fight for something. So this renewed purpose that I have at my age now is more from a space of having all of those life experiences from crisis to privilege that enables me to say, oh, my organization's not enough, but rather the collective of who we are is what we want to create in this world. So instead of fighting against something, I'm creating something new with other people. And that's the sense of purpose. It came from both crisis and privilege. And that's something that I would hope others would be able to have in that world. Most times we have a sense of purpose because of what went wrong and what we're fighting against. My invitation is having the privilege of time, and I think of the human EDU experience as a classic example, having time for adults to have the privilege to think about who they are, what their purpose is, that enables them to fight for something, not just against something.
Juan Carlos, I'm going to share my screen and show you one of my favorite quotes, and I'd like for both of us to reflect. Give me a second.
Okay.
My screen now.
Now, yes, Leo Tolstoy, yes.
So Tolstoy it's attributed to Tolstoy. Am I mad to see what others do not see, or are they mad who are responsible for all that I'm seeing? And the reason I'm sharing this as a as a as a catalyst for our conversation is without getting into any names or political stances or anything. The work that you do, the work that many of our fellow educators who have been on this journey with us today do, has become completely countercultural, not only in the US or Argentina where I am, but all over the world. It's like values, tolerance, inclusion, respect, diversity, equity have become words that are negatively loaded in the societal zeitgeist. And again, without needing to make any reference to any political situation or any particular characters in our world, how do you live with that? How do you renew your motivation in the face of these seemingly unsurmountable odds?
Yes, yes. Well, what a great question. And here is what is coming very present for me is, again, the privilege of having both experience and knowledge. And that is the space of there was intuitively this sense that I bring to the world of social justice, meaning people to be treated fairly, for people to feel empowered. And that experience is what drives me in this world, no doubt. And I realize that most people might not have that. One of the things that I have learned around this is, as I don't know if this has been true for you, Gabriel, but every time I come up with an idea, people will always say, oh, that's so visionary. And then they'll go back to doing what they were doing. And so I started to get comfortable with that quote of just understanding that I'm not going to be upset because other people can't see what I see. Rather, I'm going to continue to do that. It's a very lonely world, which is why this ecosystem collective is so important, because I get to be connected to other visionaries like yourself and all the other people that we met, that by being around them, that helps sustain the time in between. So I'm really clear, we have to find what are our support systems. So that's really important. And I think I have found a support system to be connected with other people who are just as much visionaries as I am about what is possible, not what is impossible. And then the last thing that I'll offer is, again, knowledge, because it comes from both experience and knowledge. So I am learning now in my unofficial postdoctoral research is understanding a little bit more about neuroscience and quantum physics. And what I've learned is how we can rewire our brain because of the synapses that occurs of intentionally creating new stories. We also know, because of epigenetics, that our DNA, so whatever happened to me, 5 generations ago, might be more sensitive and might show up differently about certain experiences. So understanding that knowledge, what I do know about the quantum physics is this, my most favorite theory is the entanglement theory. That the theory that knowing that the particles, when we're all made up of energy, particles can be split and still be connected fascinates me. And that if we're all vibration, we know that fear energy is very, very addictive. It is also very undisciplined. So it can create a big mass of hysteria in seconds, fear. The only other energy that is stronger than that is love. And one of the things that I always tell people all the time is walk down any busy street and just do this 1 block each. 1 block, walk down with a frown on your face and notice people's reactions to you. Walk down the next block with a smile on your face and notice a difference in the reaction of people. That is the entanglement theory. We are all connected, and knowing that and then having the experiences of this ecosystem collective is what continues to enable me to sustain myself and stay hopeful about not what is going to happen. I'm not so, there's a quote from Dr. Walker. Let me not be attached to my outcomes, but rather just committed to the process. And that's what sustains me.
Well, thank you. Couple of comments on what you said, Juan Carlos. The entanglement theory is probably one of the greatest mysteries of modern science, and I was reflecting as you were saying that at least for me, the baffling nature of the entanglement theory, the unexplainable, as you said, no, that particles that might be light years separated can behave in sync, is wonderful to me, because it means that we have so much more to learn, no? And there's a phrase by one of these Indian gurus that said that we are separated by what we know, and we are united by what we don't know, no? And it's
Who said that?
it's I think it was said Guru. I don't want to.
Wow.
But I'll find it for you. And the other thing is, when you mentioned being a visionary and the rarefied air, it reminded me of a conversation we recently had with a friend of ours at dinner, and this brings me to the question that we've asked almost everybody in our segments, and it has to do with AI, no? And the reason I say that is because when I play around with ChatGPT and I ask it to be my shrink, it tells me, oh yeah, you're a visionary, and when people don't follow you, you're lost, and you'd rather not connect with them, so for fear of being misunderstood, etc., which is interesting insights. And you and I have had some interesting conversations regarding AI. And the question is specifically, being the person that you are, being so aligned with your sense of purpose, working for social justice, and supporting and working with so many organizations that are out in the field, in the body, feeling, in the arts, connecting with humans, you're still interested in AI. How do you see the impact of AI in this field, in the humanitarian work? Is it incompatible? Does it alienate us? Is it our friend? How do you see that in this field?
Ah, great question. I will say this, and I hope people will at least take this part to heart if they ever hear it, and that is AI for the visionaries of wanting to have good human beings on this earth, to have the protection of the earth. AI is our best friend. AI for the social justice warriors out there, AI needs to be our best friend. And how do I know that? Well, let's go back several hundred years ago, where in a place that is known as China, had gunpowder for hundreds of years. You know what they were using that for? Fireworks. Europeans learned about gunpowder. You know what they used it for? To conquer the world. I'm not saying the Chinese wouldn't have eventually done that, and I'm not saying that Europeans are bad for conquering the world. I'm not. My point being is any tool can be used to harm or can be used for good. And the power of what AI can do, I guarantee you, Gabriel, AI will be used for bad. But for those of us who are visionaries, for those of us who want such great outcomes and want to have an educational system that shows the brilliance of students, AI is our friend. And how do we have that become our friend, our best friend, so that, as you know, I always like to say, it's my greatest thought partner now, who helps me organize everything that's coming through my head. So that would be my easy response and my analogy that I would offer of how to use AI. It is up for us because it's not going anywhere, and it's up for us who want to be visionaries and continue to do great work as educators. We want to embrace that as much as we can.
Wonderful. Final question, Juan Carlos, is you're one of the people that I know who has been best at developing a compelling narrative for the type of education that we advocate. And I think a lot of what we're missing out in the world is how can we convey that the mislabeled soft skills and compassion, empathy are actually tools that we need to succeed in the world. That whoever can touch, can connect with their sense of purpose, is in a far better position to survive and thrive in today's world than in the future. So, what would you say to the many educators out there who will be listening to this conversation and who struggle to develop a compelling narrative about what we're trying to do?
Great, wonderful question. Well, I think one of the first responses that come to my mind in thinking about this is first to ask every educator to think about every global and local challenge that they may be encountering. I can speak to the global encounters that we have conflict like no other. We have companies that basically all complain about the same thing, and that is conflict. So you ask any CEO, ask any state, presidential state person, and the challenge that they have is conflict. And that conflict comes from the very simple thing that we don't know as human beings of how to navigate. We navigate it often through a violent way, but that only recycles more violence, which is why we are where we are. And as educators, if we want to be able to address conflict that every leader in the world and every CEO is always figuring out how to address, then the human relationship with one another is the one thing that requires human beings. We're not going to solve our problems using AI by having an AI talk to another AI about how to deal with what conflict exists. We will come together by understanding that we have relationships with one another, that we are connected to one another. And that, I think, is the piece that often gets overlooked when we think about conflict. And the simple way to think about this is this. Gabriel, we have the solutions to feed the world, and yet we have not done it. Why? Because of human being conflicts, whether it's ego, fear, whatever it is. So for us as educators, we need to realize it is understanding how to navigate this as a human being. That's probably the most important thing that we as educators can do. AI is going to teach us how to do math and read and write. But as human beings, only human beings can teach us how to navigate being this unique creature of all the creatures out there in the world and maybe even the universe. So thank you for that question. And I hope we can continue to share that message.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. It's been, as usual, a great pleasure to exchange ideas and thoughts with you. And I know that all who watch the video are going to benefit immensely from your insights and your life story. So thanks a million. Let me cut the live stream.